We're counting down 13 abandoned billionaire estates you will never find on the usual maps. Places once guarded by media barons, steel giants, tech moguls, and former royals, now left to decay or locked under government control. From Spanish cliffside retreats and Mumbai's empty high-rises to American private islands, Middle Eastern palace shells, and English manors frozen by sanctions. These are mansions so controversial and powerful, Google barely shows them. Homes too tight to collapse, scandal, or politics for any ordinary tour. Each reveals how extreme wealth can crumble into silence, outlived by the world around it. Let's begin, starting at number 13. Number 13. Perched above the Mediterranean in Sotogrande, Spain, Crucero was once Vladimir Kaczynski's sanctuary in exile. Set on a 3,500 square meter lot, the villa's pale stone walls and sweeping terraces offered privacy and sea air, a sharp contrast to the chaos that drove Kaczynski from Moscow. As founder of Media Most, he controlled Russia's largest private media empire until 2000, when fraud charges and state pressure forced a $300 million sale to Gazprom. Released from Spanish custody on $5.5 million bail, Kaczynski lived here under house arrest while his fortune unraveled. Yet unlike the mansions seized by courts or frozen under sanctions, Crucero remains quietly in his name, its gates closed, its marble halls largely unused, a monument to a media baron's fall, left vacant more by exile than by law. Number 12. In the heart of Mumbai's Andheri district, Kingfisher House once stood as the nerve center of Vijay Mallya's sprawling empire. Designed as a gleaming, multi-story corporate mansion, its glass facade and private gardens signaled the ambitions of a tycoon who styled himself as India's king of good times. At its peak, Kingfisher Airlines was valued in the billions, with Mallya's fortune tied to liquor, Formula One, and aviation. But by 2012, mounting losses and unpaid taxes pushed the airline into bankruptcy, leaving over $1 billion in debt. Creditors and India's Enforcement Directorate moved swiftly, sealing the building, freezing assets, and launching fraud investigations that forced Mallya into self-imposed exile. Today, Kingfisher House sits locked and deteriorating, a stark reminder of how corporate showpieces can become cautionary tales when fortunes collapse. Number 11. Overlooking the Arabian Sea in Mumbai's Cuff Parade, Seawind stands as a quiet outlier in the Ambani family's real estate empire. Rising 14 floors above one of India's most coveted waterfront districts, the tower was once the core residence for Mukesh Ambani and his extended family. But after the completion of Antilia, a 27-story skyscraper mansion a few miles away, Seawind's marble lobbies and panoramic balconies have remained largely unoccupied. Municipal records confirm only occasional use, with sprawling apartments left in limbo as family members relocated, and a tangle of zoning disputes has complicated any redevelopment. Unlike seized or bankrupt estates, Seawind's emptiness stems from shifting dynastic priorities, not legal restraint. The building endures as a symbol of urban stasis, where the ambitions of one era leave behind a silent, underused monument to a family's changing fortunes. Number 10. Deep in Surrey's exclusive Wentworth estate, a grand mansion stands neglected behind high hedges and rusted gates. Once the English refuge of Boris Berezovsky, the Russian oligarch who rose to power during the wild privatizations of the 1990s, this estate became a symbol of both his fortune and his exile. After Berezovsky's dramatic fall from Kremlin favor and flight from Russia, he settled here, pouring millions into the property as legal battles raged on both sides of the channel. But in 2013, his sudden death in the house's bathroom left the estate in limbo, sparking years of unresolved probate disputes. With no court-ordered seizure, the property slipped quietly into disrepair, paint peeling, gardens overgrown, windows clouded with dust. The mansion's fate now hangs in legal uncertainty, a silent witness to how even the richest exiles can leave behind only empty halls and unanswered questions. Number 9. On a quiet Brooklyn block, the skeletal frame of Naftali Bennett's mega mansion looms over its neighbors. Conceived in the mid-2000s as a 30,000 square foot palace of limestone, glass and steel, the structure was meant to crown Bennett's rise as a developer. Permits filed with the New York City Department of Buildings outlined grand staircases, a private theater, and a rooftop garden, a vision of urban luxury at its most ambitious. But when the 2008 financial crisis struck, financing collapsed almost overnight. Construction ground to a halt, leaving only bare concrete floors and exposed beams behind. Bankruptcy filings soon followed, as creditors and contractors filed mechanics' liens in a scramble for what remained. More than a decade later, the unfinished shell endures, windows boarded and scaffolding rusted, a monument to speculative excess and the sudden violence of an economic downturn. Here, the promise of opulence never reached completion, just a lingering reminder that even in the heart of New York, fortunes can evaporate, leaving only the bones of abandoned ambition. 8th place, on the shimmering Gulf coast of Ajman, the half-finished palace of Humayd bin Abdulaziz Al Nuaimi stands as a rare monument to royal ambition left unresolved. Conceived as a sprawling waterfront compound for one of the United Arab Emirates' ruling families, the project began with grand plans, multiple wings, private docks, and sweeping gardens meant to rival the most lavish palaces of the region. Yet by 2016, construction had halted. Cranes disappeared from the skyline, and satellite images revealed entire wings left as empty shells, their concrete frames exposed to the desert sun. Despite the scale of the vision, only a portion of the estate is maintained, with a skeleton staff keeping lights on in the main residence while unfinished annexes gather dust. There are no headlines of legal battles or scandal here, just the quiet reality that even royal coffers can run dry or priorities can shift, leaving a would-be palace as a silent fragment of what might have been. Number 7. Off the misty shores of Washington state, Allen Island sprawls across 292 private acres in the Salish Sea. For decades, this remote sanctuary belonged to Paul Allen, the Microsoft co-founder whose tech fortune once made him one of the richest men on Earth. Allen envisioned a personal retreat with its own airstrip, a deep-water dock and sweeping forests, an island large enough to vanish from the world. The compound included caretaker cottages and a handful of structures, but it never reached the scale of a full-time billionaire playground. After Allen's death in 2018, the island slipped into a quieter era. Estate records show only sporadic visits, with maintenance crews keeping the runway clear and the docks intact, but little sign of the grand gatherings once imagined. Unlike seized estates or scandal-driven abandonments, Allen Island's silence comes from the absence of its owner. A vast, meticulously prepared refuge, now left to the elements, its ambition outliving the billionaire who dreamed it. Number 6. Nestled among the wooded hills of Blaubeuren in southern Germany, the Merkel estate stands as a silent witness to the fallout of the 2008 financial crisis. Once the private retreat of Adolf Merkel, a billionaire whose empire spanned cement, pharmaceuticals, and rail, this sprawling property saw its fate shift almost overnight. At the height of his power, Merkel controlled Ratiofarm and Heidelberg Cement, presiding over a fortune estimated at over 9 billion euros. But the crisis struck with brutal force. Leveraged bets soured, and by late 2008, his holding companies faced debts exceeding 4 billion euros. German insolvency filings detail a desperate scramble for restructuring, but the pressure proved overwhelming. In January 2009, Merkel took his own life, leaving the estate's halls and gardens in a state of uneasy quiet. Minimal maintenance keeps the grounds from total decay, yet the mansion's vast rooms remain largely unused. Here, the echoes of a global market collapse linger not in headlines, but in the hush that follows the end of a dynasty, an opulent refuge now marked by absence, where power and ambition gave way to silence. In the fifth place, a sprawling palace compound in Noida stands as a stark reminder of how India's steel fortunes can unravel. Once the private domain of Pramod Mittal, this 25-acre estate was conceived during the height of the commodities boom, a period when Mittal's business interests stretched from Kolkata to Europe, and his family name carried global weight. Behind high walls and guarded gates, the property was designed to host lavish gatherings. With manicured lawns, guest villas, and a central mansion intended as both residence and symbol of power. But as the global steel market faltered and Mittal's debts mounted, the estate became mired in crisis. By 2020, unpaid dues totaling over 1,400 crore rupees triggered a cascade of civil court attachment orders, freezing large portions of the compound. Land registry filings reveal a complex web of creditor claims, with multiple Indian courts issuing legal attachments between 2020 and 2022. Today, much of the estate sits neglected, its future tangled in litigation, its grandeur overshadowed by financial collapse. Here, the ambitions of a once mighty industrialist have been reduced to a legal battleground, where the gates remain locked and the lawns grow wild, caught between the promise of wealth and the reality of ruin. Number 4. Hidden behind high walls in Mexico City's Lomas de Chapultepec. A palatial villa once signaled the rise of Genli Yegon, a pharmaceutical tycoon whose wealth and influence seemed untouchable in the early 2000s. The mansion, spanning 4 stories and featuring 10 bedrooms, 14 bathrooms, a private pool, and an elevator, was designed for opulence. But in March 2007, its fate changed overnight. Federal agents raided the property and uncovered over $205 million in cash, alongside gold coins, luxury vehicles, and a cache of weapons. This was not just a record-breaking seizure. It was a turning point that placed the estate at the center of an international criminal investigation. Authorities accused Yegon of importing precursor chemicals for methamphetamine production, triggering a wave of legal action that reached across borders. The villa was swiftly transferred into government custody, first to the SAE, the agency responsible for managing seized assets, and later became the subject of a high-profile auction. By 2019, the property had been sold to a youth sports foundation, but legal battles over its ownership continue. Today, the mansion stands as a stark example of how the machinery of criminal forfeiture can immobilize even the grandest symbols of wealth, transforming a billionaire's sanctuary into a government-held asset, its marble halls silent, its future decided not by fortune, but by federal order. Coming to the top 3, the Palm Beach oceanfront once claimed by Dmitry Rybolovlev stands as a rare case where even the shell of billionaire ambition has been wiped from the map. In 2008, Rybolovlev, fresh off a record-setting sale worth $6.5 billion of his Russian fertilizer empire, paid $95 million for a sprawling estate on North County Road. The property, previously owned by Donald Trump, stretched across 6 acres of prime Florida coastline, with 3 houses, marble floors, and a private dock. Yet after the purchase, the main residence sat almost entirely empty. For nearly a decade, the mansion's lights remained off, its gardens untended, while legal battles over divorce and offshore trusts played out in courts from Geneva to Miami. By 2016, the story took a final turn. Rybolovlev secured a demolition permit, and the entire estate was razed to the ground. Where marble columns and grand staircases once stood, only vacant lots remained, later subdivided and resold as bare land. The erasure was absolute. Not a single wall or window left to mark the scale of vanished excess. Unlike mansions seized by governments or frozen by sanctions, Palm Beach's most expensive home simply disappeared. Its value not just lost, but physically destroyed. Here, the ruins are invisible, and the silence is total, a reminder that even the grandest symbols of wealth can be erased, leaving nothing behind but the memory of what once was. In second place, a sprawling mansion in Potomac, Maryland, stands as a rare example of a billionaire's estate forcibly transferred by the full weight of the US anti-corruption law. Behind its stone facade and manicured lawns, the 9-bedroom residence once belonged to the family of Teodoro Obiang Nguema Mbasogo, the long-serving president of Equatorial Guinea. At the height of the country's oil boom, Obiang's relatives quietly acquired the property for $2.6 million, funneling funds through Riggs Bank as part of a broader pattern of suspicious financial flows. The 9,200 square foot estate, set on 2 fenced acres, became a symbol of the regime's reach, far from the poverty of Malabo, yet funded by the same national oil revenues that fueled Obiang's decades in power. That distance collapsed in 2011, when the US Department of Justice filed a landmark forfeiture case, alleging that the property was purchased with the proceeds of corruption. The legal process was exhaustive. Federal investigators traced transactions, filed civil complaints, and ultimately secured a settlement requiring the Obiang family to relinquish the mansion. Unlike properties merely frozen under sanctions, this was a full transfer of title. Ownership moved from a foreign head of state's family to the US government by court order. The house was auctioned for $2.8 million, with proceeds earmarked for public benefit programs in Equatorial Guinea, closing a legal loop that stretched from West Africa to suburban Washington, D.C. Today, the Potomac Mansion is no longer a private sanctuary for the powerful. Its seizure marks one of the highest-profile victories for U.S. cross-border asset recovery, a case where the machinery of justice overtook the privileges of the petro-elite. The gates remain, but their meaning has changed. Not just a barrier to entry, but a reminder that even the grandest homes can pass from untouchable to unclaimed, their fate decided by the cold logic of the law rather than the will of their owners. And finally, in first place, the story of Sutton Place in Surrey, England, brings the countdown to its most dramatic climax. Spanning 72 acres of manicured grounds and ancient woodland, this Elizabethan manor has stood since the 1520s, its stone walls and leaded windows witnessing 5 centuries of shifting power. Sutton Place is no ordinary country estate. It is a Grade 1 listed mansion, once home to oil tycoon J. Paul Getty, and more recently, the centerpiece of Alisher Usmanov's British holdings. Usmanov, a steel and mining magnate whose fortune soared above $18 billion, acquired Sutton Place in the early 2000s, investing in extensive renovations that restored the manor's Tudor grandeur while adding modern luxuries to its 30-plus rooms. For nearly 2 decades, the estate operated as a private fortress, shielded from public view by high hedges, security patrols, and a discreet trust structure. That changed in March 2022, as Russia's invasion of Ukraine triggered an unprecedented wave of international sanctions. The UK government moved swiftly to freeze assets linked to oligarchs with close Kremlin ties. Sutton Place was named in official notices from the Office of Financial Sanctions Implementation. Its ownership immobilized under a sweeping asset freeze. Land registry records reflect these restrictions, barring sale, transfer, or use of the estate for profit. The effect was immediate. A property that once symbolized unassailable wealth became untouchable, its gates locked by order of the state rather than the will of its owner. Unlike mansions lost to bankruptcy or slow decay, Sutton Place remains meticulously preserved but legally inert. A heritage asset in limbo, its fate suspended by geopolitics. The lawns are trimmed, the facade immaculate, yet the halls are empty, and the future of the estate hangs on the shifting tides of international law. Here, the logic of sanctions is absolute. Not a single brick can be sold, not a single guest entertained until the freeze is lifted. Sutton Place stands as the most powerful emblem of the series. A palace built for kings, later owned by billionaires, now rendered silent by the machinery of state. It is a reminder that even the grandest ambitions can be stopped cold, that fortunes measured in billions can be paralyzed overnight, and that the landscapes of power are never truly permanent. In the end, the estate remains, outliving its owners, its gates rusting quietly while the world beyond moves on. Across all 13 of these deserted estates, one pattern is unmistakable. Even the most fortified empires and extravagant fortunes can collapse, leaving marble corridors and locked gates as silent proof. Power fades, assets freeze, and the landscape outlasts every billionaire. In the end, no amount of wealth guarantees permanence. These ruins are monuments to how quickly privilege can turn to exile and opulence to emptiness. Thank you for watching.